Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Dukeman, and today I have with me Mr. Joshpae White, good friend of mine, known him for a long time from back in the day working in fire. How you doing, Yosh?
And I'm really doing well. It's good to be here, man.
Glad to have you. It's good that we've kind of been able to stay in touch over the years, and that this was something that we could come together on and do a little collaboration with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, why don't you tell us about yourself, your background?
Okay. So I have been in the fire service since I was 17. I grew up all across California. Was born in Orange County in Southern California. My dad early on got a job with Fish and Game, so took us out to the middle of nowhere in Northern California. And we lived on a fish hatchery. And that's when I first got introduced to firefighting. My dad was a volunteer firefighter, and all of his outfits that he got to put on, I loved all the things that he got to bring home. He ended up transferring over to the coast, to the Redwood Coast in California, when I was in junior high, and he transferred as a volunteer firefighter there. And I saw my first live fire. They lit a building on fire and practiced putting it out, and that's when I was really hooked. And then I found a way to get into a fire science class in junior high. I knew that's what I was going to do for a very long time. My family also is steeped in military tradition. My grandparents on both sides were in the Navy and the Army Air Corps, respectively. My uncle and father were both in special operations in the Army. So I got a big push. I had a big desire to also spend time in the military. And I got a big push from dad to be a Green Beret like him. My uncle was alert long range reconnaissance patrol. Was killed in March of '68 in Vietnam. And so I grew up with all of the tradition and all of the uniform items, and just really had ingrained what a pillar military service built in the men of my family. So I went to a fire science class in high school, and they kind of groomed you to get a job with CalFire. It was then known as CDF, the State Fire Department for California. I interviewed when I was 17. I was a junior in high school, and that summer, late in the summer, when one firefighter left to go to another agency, I was picked up and was really green and was really hungry, um, and just wanted to learn. Um, the next summer, I left CDF and became a Marine. Went into the Marine Corps as a firefighter and spent 4 years as an aircraft firefighter in the Marine Corps. Um, and that's where my relationship with alcohol really blossomed. I drank a little bit in high school, went to parties. We were on the beaches, so there was always bonfires going, but it wasn't a significant impact or part of my life, I don't think. I do remember my first blackout drunk was in junior high. I remember it was on tequila, and I remember I couldn't drink tequila for 6 years. But as soon as that 6 years was up, I was off to the races with tequila, and I became a tequila connoisseur. Um, I've always I mentioned all of the things that my dad got to wear. For some reason, it was always something. I was really into how I looked, what I looked, and how the things that I wore, the uniforms or whatever it was, set me apart from other people. For some reason, that was a big aspect of my life. I was pretty self-aware, self-absorbed, and into self for a lot of years. So if I played football, even if I didn't, even if I didn't play a position that needed uh, a cowboy collar on my neck, I needed that. I needed something that set me apart always. I think that dovetailed into the Marines because they have the best uniform of all of the services. um, and I think I wasn't sure what branch I wanted to go in, but The Army guy always wanted to take me out to a restaurant to dinner. The Air Force guy always had a sign on the door that said, "Be back in 20 minutes." I never saw the guy there. The Navy fellow just wasn't impressive. And I didn't really want to be a Marine. I wanted to be in the Army. And Gunnery Sergeant Barker in Eureka, California, every time he came out of his building, he was always sharply dressed in um, a class Charlie or Delta dress uniform, which is blue pants, khaki shirt, white Marine Corps cover. The Army guy always had wrinkly camouflage. And I was like, who are you hiding from? This is 1995. We're not at war with anybody. And the Marine, Gunnery Sergeant Barker, always put his cover on when he came out of his door and sized it perfectly so it fit perfectly. He looked like he was straight off of a poster. And I was like, that guy's got something that I want. And I knew that all of the branches were different, but I knew the Marine Corps had something that set them apart from all of the others. And when I could find that I could meld those two aspects of my life that I wanted to meld together, service to the country and firemanship, it seemed like a no-brainer. Mm. I went to Fire Academy in Texas. Again, I was one of 50 Marines on an Air Force base, so that set me apart from everybody. So I was really happy with that. I always liked to be funny. I always liked to be the center of attention. When we'd go out to bars, I always wanted to buy everybody drinks, so that they liked me more, so that I could be the center of attention, and so that I seemed funnier, and like people wanted to be around me more. I quickly went to Okinawa, Japan, where the drinking age is 20 years old. I got there a month before I turned 20. So that means that when I came back to the States, it was a month before I turned 21. So in my mind, I had two 21st birthdays, which was exciting to me. It's a big part of the camaraderie of drinking, of the esprit de corps that it meant to be a Marine with your team. And I latched onto that. Drinking was such a big part of the celebrations that we had, of, in my case, not many sadnesses, but if there was a sadness, usually it was because somebody rotated back to the United States. Nothing traumatic happened the whole time I was in, but sadnesses and celebrations were always based around camaraderie and alcohol. And I really, really embraced that. That really appealed to me. But to the downfall, I think, of what I was really about. I wanted to be a firefighter because I wanted to give back. I wanted to be of service to others. But I got into a point in the Marine Corps, the fire service, you work day on, day off, and then you work 48-hour shifts on the weekends. So you either have work a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, Monday, and it rotates every week. So we would get off work at 8. We would go buy beers and play drinking games until mid-afternoon, and then we would go to the enlisted club and we would drink until it closed around 2, and then we would go off base and we would drink until those closed around 4, and then we would go to work. And our job was firefighting. We drove a 33,600-pound crash fire rescue truck every day, and it didn't strike me the importance of what I was doing. I was in charge of a crew of 3 to 4. I was driving an immense piece of equipment. And American firefighting rigs, they dwarf the Okinawan vehicles that we were driving around. It was insane. The size of an Okinawa pickup truck or car versus our crash truck was just intimidating. And I didn't take what I was doing serious. It didn't matter to me that I was still drunk from the night before, showing up on the shift, because everybody was. That's just what we did. Just didn't seem like a big deal. Plus, we'd PT, we'd go run, and I was positive that I was sweating out all the alcohol. So I was pretty sure I wasn't that drunk by the time my shift started. And that went on for about a year. Nothing of significance, no significant incidents. Just that began developing what my lifestyle was like, what I was accustomed to, and what I enjoyed. When I came back to California after Okinawa, Japan, I went to 29 Palms. And when you say 29 Palms to people, people usually have an understanding already, and you usually get a sour face looking back at you because Joshua Tree is a beautiful place to visit. Nobody wants to live there.
Yep.
And you're already in the Marine Corps. It's not the best treated branch. We don't have the best food. We don't have the best equipment. Really, all we have is each other. All we have is that camaraderie. All we have is that esprit de corps, that pride of ownership, that honor, courage, and commitment that get drilled into us from day one, training day one in boot camp. And we made the best of that. And we started doing the exact same thing in 29 Palms. I would go to Las Vegas on the weekends. I would go to Palm Springs, anything to get away from the sand and the desert. And we would party a lot. And I didn't like looking back. I can't realize. I'm just flabbergasted that how many lives I put at risk because I know I was driving those fire trucks drunk. I know I was, and that never set in on me. It never was a reality. Nothing bad ever happened until one day I was driving to work, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. And in the military at that time, this is 1998. They check your ID to make sure that you're supposed to be on a military base until 5 a.m. And at 5 a.m., they stopped checking IDs, and the sticker was good enough. And I was the last ID card to be checked one morning on my way to work to go for a run. And I was told to pull my vehicle over. And I was run for a DUI. I blew a .19 on my way to work to drive fire trucks and to be in charge of a crew of Marines. But I didn't think that I had a problem. I didn't think that I had an issue. I think that everybody did it and I just got caught. If it would have been 5 minutes later, everything would have been fine like it had been countless times before. I just chalked it up to experience. In the Marine Corps, when you get charged, you have a choice. You can have a court martial or you can have a non-judicial punishment. I chose a non-judicial punishment, which is basically accepting guilt and accepting whatever punishment your commanding officer is going to give you. There's a maximum punishment of which I received. I was demoted in rank, essentially 2 ranks, because I was supposed to promote to corporal the next month. So I didn't promote to corporal the next month, and I was reduced from lance corporal to private first class that month. I was docked half a month's pay for 2 months. At the time was $500 a month for 2 months. And I was assigned 45 days of extra military instruction. So I had to clean toilets and trash cans every night for 45 days. And I couldn't leave my room except to go to my workstation for 45 days. The maximum punishment you can get. I was sent to some alcohol awareness classes to find out if I had a problem. And it sounded like I drank just like all the other Marines. What I'm looking back on it, there was a lot of time that I didn't drink. So, but once I did, it was on. And that followed on after I left the Marine Corps. So about another year left in the Marine Corps, I think I had, year and a half. And on my birthday weekend, which is Memorial Day weekend, of the year that I was getting out of the Marine Corps, 1999, we went to Arizona, to Lake Havasu. And we'd been going into the lake all day, and it was starting to get dusk, and the sun was going down. And I thought, well, I don't want to go into the lake to pee. I'm just going to pee on this tree. And I'm getting arrested for public urination in Lake Havasu. I still didn't think I had a problem. This is just the weather. It was cold. There were so many excuses. It's not that big a deal. And they took me to jail. I had to pay $500, and I got out of the Marine Corps the next week and went back to Humboldt County, California. I had to drive all the way back down to go to court. It didn't seem like a significant incident. I got out of the Marine Corps on a Friday, and very much like you in your start with CDF, I came back to CalFire, which was CDF at the time, that following Monday as a seasonal firefighter, and working in Humboldt. And it was on. I was a career firefighter. I was excited. I was still fresh, but I was a little bit salty because I'd been a firefighter for some time. I'd been a
Mm.
Marine. I was really full of myself. I was really full of just beaming with pride. Um, and I was really good at drinking. And firefighters were very similar to Marines, is what I found. So I kind of navigated myself into the nightlife world because I liked being the center of attention. At this point, I also was really self-absorbed in the opposite, just absorbed in the opposite sex. I just wanted to hook up with people. And I didn't want to have relationships. I started to run some calls that were a little bit more significant, that were a little bit traumatic, that lingered with me a little bit longer. And this is when I kind of started more risky behavior, more one night stands, more just typical. Now that I know what PTSI is, post traumatic stress injuries are, and what the signs and symptoms of them were, I was already starting to self medicate after my second or third season back with CalFire. I really liked being the center of attention, like I just said. So I wanted to be in that bar scene. I loved going to bars. I didn't like drinking alone at all because there's nobody to watch me when I'm at home. There's nobody
Yeah.
to see how funny I am when I'm at home, right? Um, so I worked my way up. I was a janitor at a nightclub in Eureka when I was in high school. Got a job back with that nightclub as a doorman. Became security. I get along really well with people. And even though I'm a Marine and I think I'm really strong and I think I'm a badass, I don't fight. And I don't like fighting and I don't like conflict, which is kind of bizarre because I talk like I liked fighting at the time.
This is the Yosh I remember.
It's so true, but I hate conflict. I just want to resolve conflict or just make it go away, really. Maybe not resolve it. So I became good at being a bouncer. I could throw people out when they need to be thrown out, but more, I could relate to people and I could get their mind off of it, whatever the conflict was or whatever reason we weren't going to be allowed in our bar. I could diffuse it pretty well.
Mm.
So I was recruited to another bar in security, which led to bar backing, which led to bartending, which is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be the guy that everybody came to in the bar, that everybody talked to, um, that everybody wanted to know. I really liked that. Plus, if I worked, I could schedule my work around fighting fire, working in the nights, and then just getting drunk. Um, I used to make jokes that people paid me to be sober. Like if if you weren't paying me, I wasn't going to be sober. Hey,
Yeah.
what are you doing this weekend? You know what I'm doing this weekend. Hey, can you go to this? No, not happening. No, we're gonna do a 5K run. It's the Clam Beach run. All right, I'm bringing rum.
Yep.
Um, and that's just who I wanted to be. And I was meeting it. So I was a Marine, I was a firefighter, I was a bartender. I thought that I was exactly what every woman wanted. And I just kind of designed my life to do that and be that. No commitments, no committed relationships at all. No meaningful conversations with anybody. I was like from Fight Club. I was single serving friends. That's who I was. I was drinking to blackout. Um, the nature of forestry firefighting, which is what I was, is you go to work, you don't know when you're going to come back. Then it wasn't nearly as bad as it is now.
Mm.
The length of time, we would do 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe, but that was kind of the outer edge.
Yeah.
Uh, but I didn't need to drink every day. So, but when I did come home, it was on. So I never really thought of myself as an alcoholic because I can stop anytime. I've gone a month without drinking. I don't have to drink every day. Alcoholics have to drink every day. Um, and so that's kind of where I thought I was with relationships, or what my relationship with alcohol was. When I was in Humboldt, I was hanging out with college people. So we were drinking the same. There's a
Mm.
couple of brats in town. I worked at a college bar. I drank the same as the people around me. So it never seemed different.
Yep. And it
Um,
seemed like most of the firefighters, I mean, we all got off shift and we went and did the same damn thing.
so true. Um, hey, do you remember young Daniel Dukeman having to have his dad come driving to pick me up?
I do remember that. And helping you get into the vehicle at I think it was around noon.
Yeah, and that was just in my life. I hurt my foot somehow, stumbled down, fell somewhere, ended up knocking on some girl's door that I knew fairly well. Her teenage daughters were having a sleepover. They let me in. It's just yo, she's drunk again. Um, and right now, saying that, it's just embarrassing. And at the time, there was no sense of embarrassment over any of the things that I did, throwing up all over the place. Um, not being I have I've only been in one other person's wedding. Like I was never the guy that was invited to events where I had the potential to make a fool of myself. And it never really dawned on me that that's who I was becoming.
Mm.
Um, I ran some more kind of significant calls. A lot of people in first responder, law enforcement, fire, whatever the nature, nurses. I hear a lot. Commonality is kid calls are the most difficult. And I even heard you mention that it became so much more significant once you had your own children.
Mm.
And I haven't had any children ever. So it never seemed like a big deal to me. It just something that happened. I'm here to help.
Mm.
Um, but there were a couple of kid calls that looking back, knowing what I know now and after, I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I didn't react correctly to that, or that was tougher than I expected. And now looking back, oh, I got off that day. I got off the next morning at 8 a.m. and we went and had drinks and we talked about it.
Mm.
And those started to stack up. I got a permanent job with CalFire. I went to Riverside, and I just worked. I wanted to learn the area. I didn't know the area, so I worked for 4 months straight, roughly. I got a permanent engineer job driving apparatus on Schedule A. So Schedule A versus Schedule B in CalFire is municipal contracts or state forestry side. Schedule B is a state forestry side. Schedule A is a municipal or a county entity. So I worked municipal in Riverside, and then I worked municipal in Butte County in Chico.
Mm.
I was 28 when I moved to Chico, and boy, like a fish into water. You're telling me there's a in all of the 1980s and early 90s, Chico State was the number one party school in America,
Yeah.
and I'm getting paid to be here. Yes, please. What I found out when I got there at 28, that's significantly older than most of the college population. And I had a good run. I had a good 10-year run living in Chico where all of my friends were 23 years old the entire time. I got older and they stayed the same age because I could drink with them, because I made more money than them. So I seemed like kind of a big deal. Looking back on it, I think these are kind of my motivations.
Mm.
I could be that center of attention. People would laugh at my jokes. I could buy shots and shots. We're coming out with new alcohols. Jägermeister and Red Bulls was right up my alley at that time. I really found my niche. Um, but as I started getting older, I kind of changed my drinking habits. If I was going to work 3 days, I would get drunk on day one off. I would take day two off because I'm getting a little older and my body doesn't respond like it used to. And I get drunk on day three, and I'd take day four off, be sober for work. And that was kind of my standard.
Mm.
There were a couple times where I wasn't really good at it. I remember the one time that I drove into work hungover, and I remember the guy now to this day that relieved me, and he's extremely high up in our agency right now. And it's strange the things that strike you. You're like, I should not have been doing what I was doing that time. But I can only remember one of those after I got out of the Marine Corps. That's the one day that I remember, hey, you're really fucking up.
Mm.
Uh, I got a DUI when I was in um, in Chico, and I'd been there for about 2 years. So now, if we're keeping track of my alcohol-related incidents, I got a DUI on my way to work in the Marine Corps. I got arrested for public urination my last weekend in the Marine Corps. Oh, I skipped one. I got arrested for suspicion of drunk driving, but I was able to talk it down to a dry and reckless when I was living in Humboldt County in Arcata. Right. And then in Chico, I was still off to the races. So I got a DUI of a 0.10. But in California, a 0.10 is a dry and reckless, which in my alcoholic mind, that's not a DUI. So I could figure out a reason to not count all of these. The one that I got in Humboldt was that one was a wet and reckless. One I got in Humboldt was a dry and reckless. So I was able to legitimize all of these. They're just coincidences. It's just happening to me. I like to drink, but I'm not a bad person. The common denominator was I've never been in handcuffs without alcohol on board. I've never had a poor interaction with law enforcement without alcohol on board. And I do things that I wouldn't normally do when I have alcohol on board. I'd run a couple more calls. Now I gotten involved in water rescue, was a passion of mine. And I ran quite a few bad drownings, both children, adults. I've had 2 family drownings that I responded to and been the first one at scene of. And I noticed I would drink over those a little bit. One call that really I kind of dove into. So my journey to find out that I had post-traumatic stress is really tied in with alcohol, my relationship with alcohol. So on that last DUI, the 0.10 that was a wet and reckless, it's 2006. I decided, okay, that's it. I mean, that's not it. That's it, meaning no more drinking and driving. And I'm not going to quit drinking because that's just stupid. So I just won't drive when I'm drinking, was the decision I came to. But on paper, okay, that makes sense. I didn't care how drunk you were. I would always give you my keys. We would always drive around. So I was still putting people at risk every night that I was intoxicated in one way or another. Give me just a sec.
All right.
So that so DUI 0.10. Changed my mind. No more drinking and driving. I'll let everybody else drive. And that's when I started making rules about my drinking. I really made that rule where when I get off work, I'm not drinking on day 1 and day. No, I am drinking day 1 and day 3. I'm not going to drink day 2 and day 4. I really started making those rules. All right, 8 hours bottle to throttle. I'm not going to drink for 8 hours prior to going to work. And I was really steadfast and strong on those. I was adamant that I wouldn't drive after I'd had even one drink. And that lasted a good 8 years. And then I just started making like little adjustments, little changes. And I made them on one night. And it was so bizarre. I started vacation that morning. I was starting a new job with a private company owned by the unit chief, so the head of my fire department where I worked. And we were going to run water rescue for a project at the Oroville Dam. And I was hired by his company to just do standby on this. And I was going to start work the next morning at like 4 a.m. So to my line of thought, it's work, I shouldn't drink, but it's not fire department work. It's kind of a gray area, and I'm on vacation. I ran into a firefighter, a seasonal firefighter that I worked with, who had joined the Navy and was a corpsman. So in the Marine Corps is a warfighting branch of the military. We don't have the same logistical support that the other branches do. So the U.S. Navy provides our medical and dental support. So he was a green side, meaning a Marine corpsman or doc. And the Marine Corps has kind of a cult around our PT clothing. We have these shorts, they're called silkies. They're extremely tiny and extremely light and very thin fabric, and we love them to death.
Mhm.
And I meet this guy at a bar because I was just going to have one drink in midday. Nothing crazy, just a little day drink. And he's all, "Hey, you got your silkies?" I'm like, "Goddamn right I do. Of course I do. They're in my truck." He's all, "Me too. It'll be fun as if we go on a bar hop real quick." I'm like, "Well, I got this new job in the morning. I'll do like two. That's it." So we get our silkies, um, we put them on, and we go to the next bar. And I remember the next bar, and I remember the first bar. And anything else I tell you about that night, I only get from the police reports. I have no recollection of anything that happened that night. I know that I planned on driving my vehicle to that bar, so I broke my rule: no drinking and driving. I had a drink at the first bar, drove it to a parking lot. I remember thinking, all right, no problem. I'll park the car here. I'm gonna get a cab. I'll take the cab home, and then I'll take another cab in the morning. Keep in mind, 4 a.m. to get to my truck to drive to my new job that I have to impress my unit chief at. This story does not work. This plan is not a good plan. This doesn't make any sense. And this goes against, I'm breaking my alcohol rules now.
Mhm.
Uh, so what ends up happening is police report says I went to a bunch of bars. The police report says man, it says that a taxi driver saw me, offered me a ride. I denied the ride. The police report says that same taxi driver found me in front of his house coincidentally later on that night. I was urinating. Um, and he called 911. He called the police. By the time the police got there, I'd made it to my vehicle. I was asleep. I remember them knocking on the window and waking me up. I remember knowing that I shouldn't be in the driver's seat of a truck. I remember that people said you can get in trouble if the keys are in the truck. I found evidence when I went to my truck the next morning after getting out of jail that I'd puked all over the back of the truck. So I think that I tried to go to sleep in the back, try to get out of the vomit, move to the front. It was really cold that night. Probably started the truck to have the AC or the heater on. But I did a blood test and my alcohol content was 0.26. And something needed to change. I knew I was deathly afraid of losing my job. My last DUI, the 0.10, I was an engineer, so I drive fire engines for a living. I got demoted to a firefighter two for a year. And in my alcoholic mind, that's like firefighter two is the best job in the fire department. You have zero responsibility. You make sure
Yeah.
your tools work, you break shit, you pull hose into houses, you get a grab when you can get a grab, and you fight fire. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's the best job ever. That's why each one of us raised our hand and said, "This is what I want to
Oh,
do."
absolutely.
I'm getting fucking goosebumps right now. I love this job. Um, and so to me, getting a demotion, you mean I get to do my job? I didn't even notice the difference in pay because I lived paycheck to paycheck. I
Mm.
didn't need to live paycheck to paycheck, but I drank a lot. So every night I went out was at least $100 on me, let alone anybody else that I'm buying drinks for. I was convinced that I couldn't travel. I couldn't see the world because I couldn't afford it. I was convinced that I couldn't buy a house. Keep in mind, I got out of the Marine Corps with an honorable discharge. The VA is an amazing entity that can allow you to not pay any money down on a home loan. But I'd convinced myself for 15 years that I couldn't afford to buy a house. The insanity, it doesn't end with me. So I was deathly afraid of losing that job. The thing that I'm like most passionate about. I had several girlfriends, but nobody. My job was my everything.
Mm.
That was the only thing that I was committed to at that point. So I was willing to do whatever it took so that I could keep my job. So I reached out to some friends that had been in similar situations. I like I said, I'd taken vacation. I'd taken vacation because I'm a member of the CalFire Honor Guard, and that was a really important part um, to me.
And you've been
Initially,
in the honor guard for quite a while too.
yeah, I started in the Honor Guard in 2006.
Mm.
And our honor guard supports families of our fallen. We do military style ceremonies for fallen firefighters. We travel around the nation to honor them at multiple memorials after they've passed. I think when I first went in, it was the same thing. It was like the uniforms that I talked about. I'm set above everybody else. I'm
Yeah.
different from everybody else. I'm the center of attention. I've got this flashy, shiny uniform. Everybody would look at me. Um, but very quickly after I did a couple of funerals for people that were my age, it became different, and it became something that I was truly passionate about. It became a way for me to have everybody look at me and give back, which was win-win in my
Yeah.
mind. Wow. So I stepped down. At the time, I was a statewide training officer for the Honor Guard. So I taught people how to march, how to carry caskets. I knew the seriousness of this last alcohol incident. So I stepped down from that position. I reached out. I figured I was probably going to get demoted. I got a very good attorney. My buddy said, you need to convince the courts that you want to be a good person. I'm like, I do want to be a good person. I do want to do whatever it takes to keep my job because that's completely what's motivating me. He said, well, I'll give you my lawyer's number. Talk to his lawyer. He said, you need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. You think that'll help? Okay. So I went to these meetings, 12-step meetings, took a piece of paper in that they would sign off saying that I went there. So that was what it was about. It was about what can I do to look good in front of the courts? What can I do to keep my job? How do I self-sustain and survive what I want to do? So he took me to my first 12-step meeting, and I don't think I was supposed to say AA. Whoops. And I went to this meeting, and there were so many differences between me and those people. I didn't relate initially, and a couple people said a couple of things that were pretty important early on. They said, keep coming back. They said, don't drink between meetings. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. I'm serious about keeping my job. If I think, do you think that will help? Absolutely. And it might do you some good too. All right, I'll keep coming back. I won't go to meetings. They said, get a sponsor. I'm like, all right, well, I need a fireman sponsor because I'm a fireman and normal people don't know. I found a guy that I chased around the city of Chico to become my sponsor. And as big a party school Chico is, I think, and I found this talking to other alcoholics around the country and world. If it's a big alcohol related area, they have really good sobriety. And that's what I found in Chico. It's a big party town. It takes a whole lot to make party people sober. So they had really good sobriety, and they had a lot of it. There were meetings every day of the week all over the city. There was no excuse not to go to meetings. Initially, they said go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm like, I'm a fireman. I'm special. Again, I'm special. I can't abide by all of your rules, but I'll go to as many as I can. So I'd go to 2 meetings, 3 meetings a day. And just listening. Somebody told me, listen for the similarities. Stop listening to the differences. And the stories that I heard, just putting that twist on it changed the entire story. And now I had so much in common with some of these people that I thought I wouldn't be able to relate. And there were a couple of them that when they spoke, I was like, man, it was just like Gunnery Sergeant Barker. I want what that guy has. You've been sober 17 years. Who does that? What? Why? Haven't you gotten a hold of it yet? And I started to get it. I gave up after about 3 months. I gave up on finding that fire chief sponsor. But there was a guy named Mike. I call him Smiling Mike because, like, I thought comparatively my life was so much better than his. I thought this guy, his job is like like real paycheck to paycheck, not like paycheck to paycheck that I live, like scraping money together to keep the lights on. Um, horrible divorce with his wife, but loved his kid, and like so many bad things would happen, illnesses, and just so many bad things would happen to him. But every time he came to a meeting, he had a smile on his face, and God's grace or whatever message he had that he'd read in our book, um, and he wanted to give what he had to others. And I was like, man, I didn't want what that guy had. So went in not thinking that I was an alcoholic, thinking that I had an alcohol problem, thinking that I knew I was a binge drinker, I knew I was a heavy drinker. In hindsight, some of my fire captains, I remember them saying, um, "You're not an alcoholic, but," or "We know you like to party, but," and there were so many buts that weren't significant to me at the time. I would just brush it aside. My name's Yosh, and I'm here to fucking party. Um, and I do great at work.
Mm.
The other thing that I don't think that I was paying attention to at the time was I was starting to prioritize partying, being the center of attention, above the things that were really important. Like I knew I was a good fireman. Um, I could I could force doors well. I could pull hose well. I became a water rescue guy. I could swim rivers. I operate jet skis really well, watercraft really well. I became a public information officer, which now I'm on TV. Are you kidding me? I looks great on paper,
Mm.
but there's a lot more to being a firefighter, especially being a company officer. Now I'm responsible for training other folks, which I was good at because I loved it. Now
Mm.
I'm responsible for pre-planning target hazards. So businesses, you have to walk them and you have to document where everything is, how to get into everything, what products are. That doesn't sound fun at all. So that was low on my priority list. Extremely important piece of the job.
Mm.
So I started my own prioritization, which I haven't talked about this much because I always tend to talk about my alcoholism when I want to share. I tend to talk about post traumatic stress, um, but I never wanted to make myself look bad. And I
Oh.
could really tell this story and still have some kind of shining pieces. But I wasn't doing a good job. Um, and even now, I still talk. I'm still beefing myself up. I'm a good fireman, and I can do this and that. But I wasn't doing the job. There
Mm.
were a lot of things that were falling through the cracks. Generally, paperwork and administration. And I was kind of proud that people would say, operationally, you're sound. I used to hear that a lot. And I'd be, goddamn right. But, and there was always a but, and I never paid attention to the but or anything that was said after the but. But that's also a significant part of the job. So I got demoted. Um, I got demoted for my DUI. And then I got demoted for not accomplishing tasks. We have a program called Jack, Joint Apprenticeship Committee. So it's just like Jack and anything else. You're a journeyman, you're an apprentice, and then you're a journeyman. And it's a 3-year process. I went 5 years without journeying. That's a big no-no in my agency.
Yeah.
So not doing the job that I'm supposed to be, not checking my schedule. So I showed up to my station, which also, when I retold the story, was not my fault. But my schedule had changed when I was off duty. I didn't look at the schedule because I knew where my firehouse was, and I showed up to the wrong fire station because I showed up to my station. So those two things, and not doing my pre-plans, not doing my jack, and showing up to the wrong station, got me demoted to a firefighter too. But again, that's how I looked. Hey, you're going to demote me to do the best job in this
Yeah.
agency? 100%.
I can remember having this conversation with you. We might have been at a bar actually. We had this conversation. But yeah,
And then I would make everything into a joke. I remember I had a pretty significant water rescue call. I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but father and two sons, whole family, two sons, father, mother, were in a pond on what we call a cane arc coffin. one of those small rinky-dink rafts, and they were just floating. The father didn't know how to swim. They put their youngest child in an ill-fitting PFD, and it was a tragic day. And the young child died. The father tried to save him. He died. I made a swim into the pond, pulled the father, the son, and the child out, and did CPR. At the end of the deal, my captain was a paramedic, so he rode the ambulance with the small child, and I loaded the father onto a boat, operated the boat, came back, and we get back. My captain's at the hospital. My battalion chief shows up, and I'm like, all right, I'm all set. I'm gonna get the boat on the trailer. I'll grab the rescue support pickup truck, and I'll go pick Sean up at the hospital. And I was a firefighter too at the time, freshly demoted. And he says, uh, uh, can you drive that? And I knew exactly what he was talking about. I have a reputation at this point. And I'm like, oh, no, no. I still have a driver's license. This demotion's for incompetence, chief. And I thought it was the funniest thing. And he thought it was funny because obviously I'm not incompetent because I'm an awesome fireman. Just ask me or watch the news. I'll tell you on the news how awesome I am. But it's true. I was incompetent, and I did get demoted for incompetence because I wasn't good at all of the aspects of my job. Wow. So this is about a year before that final DUI, and that final DUI changed my life for the better. I knew I was going to get demoted. I tried to demote myself. I put in for a transfer to a lower rank. They said, no, you can't do that. That's not how this works. I'm like, well, it's going to happen. They said, we don't want to lose you. You're a salvageable employee. You're a good employee. I'm going to keep you. This is at my meeting with the unit chief. I'm going to keep you as an engineer as long as I possibly can. Don't worry. We're going to take care of you. I was like, all right, well, that's good enough for me. Fast forward a couple months, I lose my driver's license. There was a miscommunication between the courts, and the fire department got news that I lost my license, and they're like, well, we have to give you a leave of absence. I'm like, well, what do you mean? You said I was going to be fine. And in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense. At the time, I was super angry because you said this, you gave me a word. But in hindsight, what would have had
Did we lose you? We might have lost him. All right, we're back. We had a little technical difficulty there. We got Yosha's wife Gina in the background now, and Yosha's going to pick up where he left off.
Okay. So I'd gotten to the point where they gave me a leave of absence, and I was really mad about that because we had a conversation. But I had a good conversation with one of our deputy chiefs, and the nature of CalFire and CDF is we expand and we contract as incidents arise. And that happens individually on incidents. We have the ability to use the ICS system to expand and contract when the system gets a hold of it. And we do the same thing seasonally. When we expect to have more emergencies, more fires, we expand our size. So because of that, if you're a firefighter, it doesn't mean you're always going to be a firefighter. In the summertime, we might promote you temporarily to be an engineer. And that's what had happened. So they had limited term firefighter twos. There were seasonal firefighters one. And he's like, I have a position open. I can put you in that position. And now somebody that's done a great job, hasn't done anything wrong, has to lose his job because of you. I was like, oh, wow, that really hit deep.
Yeah.
And I'm still mad, but it's the right thing to do. And coincidentally, with my sobriety, I was at the point where I was starting to work 12 steps of my particular program. And I was actually working on my step three the day that I found out I was losing my job. And step three is basically doing a prayer. And so uh, I found out I was losing my job. I did a prayer, and I kid you not, within 5 minutes, my phone rang. This is bizarre. And it was a guy that owns a private firefighting company called Firestorm. And he had heard my story. And he was, as we say, a friend of Bill's, a friend of a guy that started the particular program that I'm a member of. He offered me a job. And at the time, I was an engineer. He offered me a captain job. He's like, let me see your resume. Let me see what you got. He's like, holy geez, you got a lot of experience. You're a fire captain. I'm like, no, I'm not a fire captain. He's like, well, you're supposed to be. Somebody of your age, somebody of your time is definitely supposed to be a captain and probably should have been a captain 5 years ago. It's like, huh, never even thought about that. So he gave me a job as a fire captain, gave me a driver because I obviously couldn't drive a fire truck, and just gave me that, extended that hand that I needed in my life because I didn't have a nest egg. I wasn't set up to have a fallback. I didn't have a backup plan. But it really set in that, hey, the things that you're doing, the things that Smiling Mike has suggested, because he never told me to do anything. He made suggestions of me. They work. This program works. I'm starting to become a better person. Don't get me wrong. I still have character defects. I still have faults at this time in life and today. But I was on the right path.
Yeah.
And I had hope. And that was the biggest thing. Like, even if in my mind at the time, the department, CalFire, was turning their back on me, this guy saw something in me. And it was enough to keep me on my feet and to keep me moving forward. One thing about the Marine Corps is always moving forward. And it kept me moving forward. It allowed me to strategize with my attorneys, come up with a new game plan, come up with a contingency plan, reached out. And at this point, I had a fairly good reputation statewide. Like, my drinking was fairly small. So if you didn't really know me, I looked really good on paper. The things that I did at that time for the honor guard, we have an amazing honor guard. Things that we do as an honor guard,
Yes.
We're top level, I think, nationwide. And so I developed a relationship doing that. So I reached out to a couple of unit chiefs who I had done funerals with and laid it all on the table. Hey, I fucked up, and I didn't realize how messed up I was being. I want to be a firefighter too. I want to start over. Can I come to your unit? And I got a unit chief that said, we'll take you right now. So there was some conversations between their unit and my unit. My unit didn't believe me that somebody wanted me and wanted me right then. And in a couple of days, they took me as a transfer as an engineer. I'm like, well, what happens when I demote to? Don't worry about it. When you demote, we've got you. All right. And so I was still running the program. I was kind of picking and choosing. I was in that that just purple sky kind of early sobriety. But I think I had about a year, 18 months or so. I got sober March 18th, 2014. And so, no, it wasn't quite that long. So, yeah, I think that I moved to Merced. I got this job in Merced, Schedule A, so municipal contract for the county of Merced in December. I moved down there. I didn't know what. I borrowed an RV, borrowed my parents' fifth wheel because I still had a driver's license, and stayed at a campground, and then like didn't know where I was going to work until I got there. Did training for a few days, found a station. All right, where can I live? Hey, did you hear that the house across the street is for rent? Are you kidding me? You know, I prayed I did what my sponsor suggested, and like the path just opened up in front of me.
Isn't that amazing how that works?
It's crazy. It's uncanny. So I rented a house across the street from the firehouse. I'm so close to this firehouse that I stole their internet. I mean, I didn't steal it. We had a symbiotic relationship. They didn't have a good laundry machine, so they did their laundry at my house. I used their internet. It was
There
a
you go.
it,
Fair
it was a
trade.
good combo. But that's how close I was to work. It took me 45 seconds to get to work. Um, and I started I the same program that I'm running for sobriety. I found a group down there. I had to go to DOI schools. So I
Mm.
was able to transfer to DOI school. And my wife gets really mad at me, but like so many good things happened to me without me deserving them. It doesn't make sense. Everything bad happens to her, nothing bad happens to me. So I'm signed up for this 36-month DOI program. I moved to Merced. They don't have that. They only have 18 months. So through no good deed of my own, just through coincidence, I get my DOI school drastically cut. I'm still very full of myself. I'm still very resentful that I have to go to DOI school because I don't believe in what it is. They're not. I don't have confidence in their. I don't have confidence in their competence.
Mm.
So I just have this air of I'm better than you, and I'm kind of a douchebag. And I meet my wife in DOI school, and I'm still conniving. I still can figure out ways to get around things, and I love loopholes. So I don't always at this point in my life do the right thing. I try to always do the next right thing now, but it was always for self-preservation, self-satisfaction at that time. So I sold my truck to my mom, so I didn't have to put a breathalyzer in it. I found a loophole there. I didn't own the truck, didn't need a breathalyzer. I just stored it in my house. But I don't like breaking the law, so I didn't drive it. I bought a motorcycle from the next door neighbors, and I would drive my motorcycle to my DUI class, not change out of my chaps when I went into the class, wear all my leather stuff. Just really am proud of, hey, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm on a motorcycle today. Just really, still, I'm working on myself, but it's a really mushy piece of clay. Okay. Um, so I do some time as a firefighter too, and I start to get my life back together. I have one significant incident that I ran where we talk about in the old days that you come from, we talk about slideshows.
Yeah.
Nowadays it's PowerPoints,
Yeah.
but talk about the slide tray that we fill with all the incidents that we've done. And that helps you be a better fireman. I think that helps you be a better firefighter. Now you have a base. So the next call, this was similar, that was similar, and now I'm getting better every time
Yeah.
because of my experience, right? So I ran a call on Halloween, and it was a traffic collision. The car had flipped over on its side. There were three teenage kids, and everything that I expected to happen, there was always a slight tweak. That whole night, there was a slight tweak, and I was not prepared for those tweaks. I was prepared for all of the car crashes that I'd seen, which was quite a few up to that point.
Yeah.
But it was Halloween weekend. We parked our fire engine. I saw an ambulance in the rearview mirror. I saw somebody come up behind me as I'm starting to assess the scene. I find a guy that's obviously dead, that was thrown out of the vehicle. I look at him. I move on. Um, this paramedic comes up behind me and says, "What about that guy?" And I'm like, "He's dead. Let's move on to the car. Let's see what else we've got." And she immediately starts crying. And I was like, "That's not supposed to happen. What is going on?" And as I turn, my flashlight's on my turnouts. As I turn, I see that it's a costume of a paramedic. It's not a paramedic. She just happened to roll up at the same time as the ambulance had just stopped. The timing just couldn't have been more perfect.
Gotcha.
And that's her friend that I just told her is dead. So it's just all these slight little tweaks. As we got up to the vehicle, I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. There's like heavy metal playing in the car. The dome light is flashing, so I'm cutting the car, and it was like one of those cool videos that you make of you being a hero. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. As I'm cutting this car apart. I get in, and the passenger is deceased, but the driver's still alive. So I climb in the bottom of the car, and there's just blood everywhere. So I'm kind of just sliding through all of the blood on the top of the car, and I'm covered now in it. And we send the driver away in an ambulance, and then all these people were on their way from Halloween party to Halloween party. So all these friends start showing up, and now the families start showing up. And the coroner shows up, and the coroner is wearing a suit. He's not the coroner, he's a mortuary fellow. He's wearing a suit, and he's afraid of getting blood on his suit. So he asked me if I would put the two deceased in a body bag. Something I've never done. Just a little bit of a tweak. I'm prepared for all these things, but that's just a little tweak. And I'm like, all right. I mean, that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
Marine Corps makes do. CalFire makes do. I haven't seen this before, but yeah, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help.
Yep.
And the family shows up, and CHP, or the sheriff's office, they don't want to get blood on their uniform. They're like, hey, can you help the family identify? So now I have to go over and open the body bag up and let the families identify this victim, something I've never done before, something I wasn't really prepared for. So I did that. And then the mom just comes unhinged, tells me I didn't do anything to save her daughter, tells me that why the driver, why it's always the driver that lives, just all of these things, starts punching me, just a little tweak, something else I hadn't seen. So just a series of slight things that didn't go like I was expecting. And I didn't know that it struck me. I didn't know that it was difficult for me. I didn't know that I had a hard time processing it. I went out the next day and I drank about it. My friend is a chaplain with CalFire. I developed a good relationship with her through funerals. She's also part of an amazing program that CalFire has called ESS, Employee Support Services, who helps people like you and me. And she wanted me to help out with a class and tell us another story of mine where I tried to save a family from another drowning, tried to save a family, wasn't able to, but did a pretty significant swim through the Feather River Canyon to get a small child. And at the end of the class, they said, hey, you taught this portion really well. You told your story great. Why don't you sit in on this class? Davina is real tricky. Taught me into her program just by taking advantage of my pride and my like, yeah, look at me, I've got the Medal of Valor, I'm a hero type of thing, to, hey, why don't you be part of this program? Why don't you be a peer? You've seen it. And also, I think you might have some post-traumatic stress. I'm like, you're kidding me, really? And they said, yeah. Have you thought about that? I'm like, no. Well, I got somebody, let me give you their number. And so I called the West Coast Post-Traumatic Stress Retreat, and it found out that I had a lot of the symptoms. The department was extremely supportive. Now we're about 18 months into my sobriety, which was great because I had a good base of sobriety. I knew that I had some problems, but I wanted to be better. One of my captains told me, hey, alcoholism is a symptom. What's your real problem? And that always struck me. I ruined this relationship with that captain, and it was always a big issue for me. And I was like, no, I'm just an alcoholic. And at this retreat, I spent 5 days with other firefighters, police, and dispatchers, all from different agencies. And my peer was a cop who'd been involved in some officer-involved shootings in San Francisco. And he said, good news, man. You found out what your problem is. I was like, oh, wow. So At this retreat, we did some group sessions that were really good. We really got to know each other well. We still have a group text, and this is 2015 now, 2016. We still have a group text going. I did EMDR, and EMDR was extremely helpful for me. I thought I was going there for this drowning call, where I received the Medal of Valor from. And no, I was just prideful that I received the Medal of Valor. And yes, it was significant, but it didn't have any interior traumas like I thought that it did.
Mm,
But it had similarities to this call that I just described. That was really um, a significant impact in me. And I didn't realize, but it pulled out some childhood trauma from my dog getting killed. And throughout that week, I would tell different stories to this therapist. We would do EMDR. And then all of a sudden she's like, okay, tell me about Ben. And I was like, what? How do you know about Ben? um, and there were so many correlations to these surprises and these things that went slightly wrong with this incident in Paradise to me getting suspended from school and letting my dog out and my dog getting hit by a car. So many of our traumas just aren't processed right.
mm,
And to me, that's what EMDR did. Like my memories, like even now, I still have goosebumps just from telling that story about that call. I can still see the strobe light, the
mm.
dome light. I can still smell, but it's greatly reduced.
Yeah.
But I would go right back to that moment because in my brain, those weren't memory files, those were now files. And for
Yeah.
me, EMDR refiles your brain, puts those things in the right filing order. And so you can register, hey, that's a memory. You shouldn't smell that. You
Yeah.
shouldn't see that light. You shouldn't hear that music. Um, and it just slowly faded for me.
Mm,
I remember the last thing was I could still see that girl's face when I zipped up the body bag, and I could still smell her hair and see her hair with the blood, and I was like, I don't want that to go away because the memory would kind of blur and fade, and it wasn't so vivid, and I was really afraid like that it would be done and gone, and that didn't seem right to me. So I
mm.
stopped that EMDR just prior to losing that face and that person because I thought
Mm.
she deserves to have her story told. Um, and the same thing with the Olsen family that died in the drowning. They deserve to have their story told. I don't want them to disappear. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's hugely important
it's light.
because it's still too long. Yeah, those stories are important because not only because they existed and they were a person, but it's important for people like you and I and others out there that remember those things because those stories affect us in a profound way and they allow us to help other people and affect other people in a profound way as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so that I guess that takes us pretty much current.
Yeah.
So I left the field. I ended up coming back, getting a job as an engineer with CalFire. My job as a fire captain with Firestorm kind of opened my mind to that prospect. So I took the fire captain test and I became a fire captain in our emergency command center in Santa Clara. I did that for about a year and a half. And then an opening came up at the CalFire Training Center in Ione, California. Um, oops. So I've been here for about 5 years or so. And we have a few different aspects. So I started off in discipline and coordination of the classes. I then became a company officer, academy instructor teaching small unit, command and control, and incident command, and driving and pumping. And then I got to what my true passion is pulling hose and forcing doors and banging ladders and doing just true firemanship. I spent the last 3 years with just an amazing cadre of just great firefighters, teaching the basic firefighter skills.
Nice.
Um, and I've had the ability. I'm active with our ESS program. I'm a peer, so I try to. I kind of have a couple of dual personalities. I'm kind of disciplinarian at this academy. I'm the guy that knife hands. I'm the guy that wants to know why your mustache isn't in regulation. You.
Hey, I just got a shave now. That's it. That
um,
that battalion chief, I don't work for her anymore.
but I also try to cut out. We have a 7-week program of firefighting skills. We have a 7-week program of company officer skills. So I usually come in pretty hard the first 2 weeks. They find out I'm a human by week 3, week 4. By the time we've developed a relationship and we're bonded as a mentor mentee, I share my relationship with alcoholism, my relationship with post-traumatic stress, and the program of employee support services that we have by the time we're near the end of our program. Um, and I want to share this with other folks. I want you not to only be able to recognize these issues in yourself, but in others. When you're telling that story, the buts. When you're telling your subordinate, we know this, but that, like, that could be a signal that they need help, and we have resources that can help folks. So when you asked me to be part of this podcast, that really dovetailed into kind of what I try to do with my classes here.
Yeah.
So that's great. I'm also right at the end of my time as an instructor. I just accepted a transfer back to the field. So next month, I'm going to go to the Nevada Yuba Placer unit, and back to my roots, Schedule B, forestry firefighting. So I'm pretty excited about that, and a
Nice.
little nervous at the same time.
Yeah. Well, you'll do well. Like so those that don't know, Yosh was my mentor coming into the fire service. So I got the wild and crazy Yosh that was like, why are you banging these young girls? When I was your age, I was banging 30-year-olds. I had that mentor that's changed grossly. But but I have no doubt that you'll do good kicking back into that role because I learned a lot from you early on. Not just how to cut loose, but also how to do the job and to do the job right. We certainly had plenty of fun times at the station and out on fires and outside of work as well. But yeah, I have no doubt that you'll just thrive at Nevada Yuba Placer. Be a good area for you, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited. And that's just, it's a continuing part of my story. I was a little nervous because I'm going to be open, right? I feel really protected right
Mm.
now in so many ways. I haven't been on an incident in a long time.
Yeah.
I was a public information officer on the campfire, but I don't have that understanding of what these new firefighters are going
Mm.
through because I haven't been for 40 days straight. Um, and I was a little bit worried about my relationship too, because my wife and I have been really spoiled, where
Mm.
I've gotten a lot of time off. I've had weekends off being an instructor. We haven't gone through a really wretched fire season, and
Mm.
she's a big part of my sobriety and is a good reminder um, to me of the path that I'm on.
Mm.
I look up to her a lot because of her sobriety and how she's done it. And I continue to learn. I think sometimes it goes both ways, but I think I definitely take more than I give to her sobriety. And so I was a little concerned about that because she hasn't known me as a fire engine captain. But I think that we're in the right place to make that change right now. And,
Yeah.
and I'm excited for what the future holds.
That's good. I'm excited for you both. You know, at least I think nowadays, this day and age, communication's more available to us is in the fire service. I mean, when you and I were working together, it was just flip phones that kind of worked sometimes in base camp.
Nokia.
Yeah, right. Like we could play Snake if we were bored. Uh, so I think like at least the communication end of things will be better. I mean, now you can FaceTime, you can do all these things to actually see each other and stay connected on some level, where we definitely didn't have that when we were early on in our careers. Um, but yeah, I think challenges are good, and you've certainly had a lot of challenges and growth just since I've really sat down and talked to you. And it's been quite a few years since we've really sat down and talked. But I think it's awesome. I'm proud of you and your sobriety and just seeing the changes in you. And you know, when I found out that you and Gina were getting married, um, that was a big surprise for me. I was stoked for you for sure. But it was like, wow, Yosh, just look at him. He's all
That
grown
guy?
up now.
That guy? I mean, if that's not a testament to what kind of woman she is, I don't know what
Oh,
is.
most definitely. Yeah, I that was actually one of my thoughts when I first started seeing stuff on social media with you two. I'm like, I don't think he's ever had a picture with a girl on social media before. And if it was probably like multiple people in a group setting or something. But yeah, so I when I saw that, I was like, okay, so there's a change going on here. And
Yeah, little guys getting all grown up.
yeah, yeah, and it's awesome. And I think it's great. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. You made this like one of the most easy interviews ever because you just know how to talk, man. And I didn't have to ask any questions hardly at all. I just got to let you roll with it and just go with it. So really happy about that. Like 9 years sobriety now, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. March 18th was 9 years, and yeah, that's a big deal. It doesn't
It is.
seem like that long ago. And my beautiful bride, if everything goes right, she will hit 9 years in June. So
Awesome.
we're litter mates as far as sobriety goes.
Nice. That's awesome. Proud of you both. That is huge, huge accomplishment. And I can appreciate that having come from a spot where I was pretty much drinking myself to death. Um,
Yeah.
I'd get home and I'd just see how quick I could find the bottom of whatever bottle I had. And, it was usually a fifth. Sometimes it was a half gallon. It didn't matter to me just as long as I was finding the bottom. So I can appreciate that turnaround. I'm thankful every day that I've made that turnaround in my life where I'm not dependent on alcohol. And that's huge. Like truly congratulations to both of you on
No, thank you.
that. So how can people find you if they wanted to reach out to you and learn more or just get to know the Yosh that rocks?
Oh yeah, that's what I put on the captain's helmet, isn't it? Yosh rocks. Yeah, Captain Fry. I'm on Instagram and I am Yankee underscore whiskey underscore actual.
Okay, and I
Um,
will put that in the show notes too.
okay.
And that's primarily where you hang out, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's my primary location, Yankee whiskey, because my name is Joshpae White, so phonetically Yankee whiskey actual.
There you go. And just final thoughts, Yosh. If there was one thing that you could say to someone right now who's struggling, who's really on the fence about treatment, or just even in the darkest of dark places, battling with PTSD, mental health, any of these issues that we talk about, what would you say to them?
Man, it oftentimes seems like it's dark. It seems like there's no hope. And I allude to your thoughts when you talked about suicide. You talked about how can I do this without putting the least amount of difficulty on anybody else. There's no way to do that
There's not.
without putting any difficulty on anybody else. And there's so many of us out here that are beginning to live our life to our true potential and are so much better for it and thought that we were on the way out, thought that we had no hope, and are are so much are so truly happy, um, and found calling and found purpose. Everybody here is here for a reason. That reason could be to have a podcast. That reason could be to teach new firefighters. That reason could be to share with people that you've had your worst day and came out on the other side. Because generally speaking, there's somebody that's already been in that hole where you are and only knows how to get out of it by getting down there in it with you. And people like you, myself, some of my mentors are willing to climb back down in there to pull anybody out because I want to save lives by pulling people out of burning buildings, by pulling people out of rivers. I know I can save lives by pulling people out of post traumatic stress. And it's just as important of a life saving measure.
So well said. Thank you. Yep. And that I couldn't have said that any better. That was awesome. Uh, if you guys are in that spot, reach out. There's a lot of people out there. Yosh is out there. I'm out there. Plenty of people willing to help and want to see that turnaround because you can definitely thrive in this life if we choose to.
Yeah. And yeah, I didn't realize like so many things would make me happy. Um,
Right.
yeah. And I mean, I keep alluding to or mentioning my wife, but man, I didn't know that I could find happiness in another person.
Mm.
The Yosh that you knew was all about numbers, right? It was about cereal.
Yeah.
You were going to eat the same cereal for the rest of your life if you were going to get married, and I was going to have that sample pack, and that's what I thought was my happiness. And that's not where I am right now. I have somebody that has the same passions. The White's passion is motorcycle riding, um, and that's our release. That's a relief. That's something that like I get goosebumps, right? Before I would think about partying. Now I think about when's our next ride. I think about when's my next ride with her, when's my next ride on my wife. Or with my ride wife. Whoa. um, Tonight I went on a ride before this podcast. So I'm just super glad that I found a partner.
Yeah,
Also.
absolutely. I think it's great. And I'm happy you did too. I look forward to connecting with you more and hopefully with Gina at some point. And really, again, congratulations, you guys, on 9 years for you and almost 9 years for Gina. And happy that you're able to come on. And I guess we'll wrap it up, guys. Thanks for watching this podcast. Catch us again next week for another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. Have a great one. Love you all and God bless.